Ah, look at these two lovebirds, so sweet, sharing a quiet, tender moment together. Well, almost sweet. No wedding ring. Oh, hold up. That's not adorable, that's unsettling. Can we please just have one cute painting without drama? Just one. Okay, deep breath. This particular painting, titled The Awakening Conscience, is by William Holman Hunt. If you scratch beneath that seemingly innocent surface, things start to get real weird real fast. And this? This is no exception. Let's dive into the world of Victorian art, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. At first glance, this painting seems like a peaceful scene between two lovers in a cozy room, but the more you look at it, the more, oh, something's not right, alarms start ringing in your head. Hunt had grand intentions here. He was trying to, let's say, influence someone special. Oh no, not that guy, the woman in the painting. She's the apple of his eye, and he was sending her a message through this piece. But here's the kicker. Instead of swooning over it, Hunt may have accidentally painted his worst nightmare into existence. Now that's what I call irony. So, let's start breaking it down. We find ourselves peeking into a dimly lit Victorian room, our eyes immediately drawn to a young woman who seems to be rising from a man's lap. It feels a bit like we've accidentally walked in on something private. Awkward. The man seems to be reaching out for her, like he's saying, "Come back here, let's talk." But she's checked out, lost in thought, her eyes fixed on something beyond. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you take a closer look at the reflection in the mirror behind them, yes, there's a sneaky mirror in the back, you'll notice she's gazing longingly at a sunlit garden outside. Plot twist. It's not him she's looking at. It's freedom calling. Now, I know what you're thinking. Looks like a typical cozy Victorian home, right? Maybe even Pinterest-worthy if you're into antique vibes, but not so fast. If you were living in the 1800s, this room would feel more like a giant red flag than a comfy living space. The furnishings are way too fancy, too pristine, almost like no one actually lives here. It's the Victorian equivalent of those people who have couches covered in plastic. Sure, it looks nice, but it's not meant for real living. One critic back then even described the furniture as exuding a fatal newness. Yikes. So what's going on here? Is this even a real home? To a Victorian observer, the answer would have been loud and clear. This room is as fake as it gets. It's a stage, a dollhouse, a holding pen for someone who isn't living life on her own terms. There's symbolism galore, so buckle up, because we're about to go on a wild ride through Metaphor City. Let's start with the obvious, her hair. In Victorian times, if a woman was going out in public, her hair would always be up, all prim and proper. But this woman's hair is down, which screams intimate moment. And here's another clue. The man is fully dressed, wearing his outdoor clothes, while she's partially undressed. Something's fishy. To top it off, the man's gloves are carelessly tossed on the floor, suggesting he just came in, rather than getting ready to leave. This isn't a cute "bye honey, see you at the office" moment. This is something entirely different. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. If you look closely, you'll notice that the woman has rings on every finger except her ring finger. Classic sign of a mistress. Yep, this isn't his wife. She's not part of the man's life, she's part of his convenience. This whole room, it's a glorified waiting area, like a fancy holding pen for his mistress, all dressed up with nowhere to go. Ever feel like you're stuck in a place that isn't really yours? Well, this woman is literally living that nightmare. Now, let's talk symbols, because this painting is practically exploding with them. First, there's a cat on the floor playing with a bird. Innocent enough, right? Wrong. It's a metaphor, because of course it is. The cat is the man, the bird is the woman, and she's been caught in his trap. Then we have the tangled yarn on the floor, symbolizing the messy situation she's found herself in. Kind of like trying to untangle your earbuds after pulling them out of your pocket, only less annoying and more life-ruining. But there's more. Look at the clock on the piano. It's encased in glass, just like the woman is trapped in her own gilded cage. The discarded glove on the floor, that's her future. Once the man is done with her, tossed aside like, well, a glove. And then there's the print on the wall, showing a woman who committed adultery and is repenting for it. Not exactly subtle, is it? And let's not forget the flowers on the piano. If they're carnations and anemones, they're symbols of engagement and abandoned love, respectively. Translation: things aren't looking great for this relationship, but, and this is important, there's a ray of light in the corner of the painting, a glimmer of hope. This represents the possibility of redemption for the woman, a chance for her to escape this miserable situation. And if you're wondering about that song they're singing, it's In the Sly Night by Thomas Moore. It's a sad tune about reflecting on childhood memories, which just adds another layer of nostalgia and regret to this whole scene. Here's the part I love imagining. Before this moment, the woman was probably seated on the man's lap, playing along as he sang. Maybe she even tried to focus on the music, but as the melancholy notes filled the air, something inside her snapped. The lyrics dredged up memories of her own childhood, times when life was simpler, more innocent. She starts to drift away, not physically at first, but mentally, emotionally. She begins to long for freedom, for the sunlight outside, and just like that, her conscience awakens. She's ready to break free. Cue the dramatic music. But why did Holman Hunt paint this? Why all the drama? Well, the whole fallen woman narrative was a big deal in Victorian England. Women who lost their sexual innocence or had extramarital relations were viewed as having fallen from grace, doomed to live out tragic lives, often ending in destitution or worse. This was the era's favourite cautionary tale. Hunt, though, gave the story a twist. Instead of condemning the woman to a life of misery, he hinted at the possibility of redemption. There's still hope for her, he says. God works in mysterious ways, and maybe, just maybe, her seducer will be the one who inadvertently saves her. Ironic, huh? But here's where it gets personal. The model for the woman in the painting? Her name was Annie Miller, and boy, does she have a story. Born in 1835 to a working-class family in London's slums, Annie didn't exactly have an easy start in life. Her mother died when she was young, and her father, a war veteran, was in poor health. She lived with relatives, and by 16 she was already working as a part-time model and, possibly, a part-time prostitute. But in those days, the line between the two professions was blurry at best. Hunt met her in a Chelsea pub, and from there, things got complicated. He became her benefactor, pulling her out of poverty, setting her up with a nice place to live, fancy clothes, and even access to an education. His ultimate goal? To transform her into his perfect, refined lady, and eventually, his wife. If you're thinking, wow, that sounds a lot like Pygmalion, you're not wrong. Hunt was, in essence, trying to mold Annie into his ideal woman, kind of like that guy who swears he can change someone. Spoiler alert, that never works. And, shocker, it didn't work here either. Hunt went on a 2-year trip to the Holy Land, leaving Annie in the care of a close friend. He gave her a list of acceptable artists she could model for and explicitly banned her from working with one particular artist, Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Why? Because Rossetti had a bit of a reputation as a womanizer. Of course, Annie, being her own person, decided she'd model for whoever she wanted. Rebel move? Absolutely. She even got close to Rossetti, which caused some drama. And we love drama. Now here's the wild part. There's speculation that the man in the awakening conscience is actually Hunt himself. Yep, he might have painted himself as the seducer. And if that's true, oh boy, did he accidentally predict his own downfall. It's like he painted his nightmare into existence. Maybe Hunt felt guilty about his relationship with Annie as he prepared for his religious pilgrimage, and this was his way of coming to terms with it. Talk about self-awareness. In the end, Hunt and Annie's relationship didn't last. They did get engaged at one point, but Annie wasn't having it. She eventually moved on, got married to Captain Thomas Thompson, had 2 kids, and lived happily ever after. Well, as happily as you can in Victorian England. She lived to the ripe old age of 90, outlasting many of the men who tried to control her life. And that's the beauty of it. Despite being labelled a fallen woman, Annie rewrote her own narrative. She didn't end up abandoned, destitute, or dead under a bridge. Instead, she threw off the shackles of Victorian expectations, kept the fancy jewellery, and lived life on her own terms. Now that is what I call a true awakening of conscience.